Allen Company, 47 years young and a proud sponsor, wishes OOIDA all the best as you celebrate 50 years.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Redding.
How long will the ongoing freight recession last? Jason Miller of Michigan State University doesn't know, but he's got a pretty good guess. We'll ask Professor Miller about that, the strike that was averted at UPS, and Yellow's ongoing troubles, among other topics within the supply chain. By now, you're probably familiar with the term nuclear verdict. It refers to extraordinarily large court judgments. The fact is, they've been a problem for a while in trucking, and now some are taking a closer look at the problem. I'll discuss a recent study with Nathan Morris of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Institute for Legal Reform. And finally, OOIDA has many tools it uses to influence what happens in Washington, D.C. on behalf of truckers, and one of those is its PAC. As part of our ongoing coverage of the association's 50th anniversary, I'll discuss the PAC with OOIDA Chief of Staff Angel Burnell and the association's Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. But first, the news with Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. We told you yesterday about the rise in diesel prices compared to last week, and you might want to get used to it. ProMiles.com had the Wednesday average at $3.88 a gallon. That's up nearly 9 cents compared to a week earlier, and analysts say the trend is likely to continue. That goes for gas prices as well, which AAA says climbed to a 3-month high of $3.69 on Wednesday. A combination of factors is leading to the increases. Analysts are blaming things like additional supply cuts by OPEC and Russia, and extreme heat across the world that has sidelined oil refineries. But if you're a glass half full kind of person, keep in mind that prices are still well below what they were at this time last year, and that goes for both gas and diesel. There's a fresh effort in the U.S. Senate to tighten up safety standards for shippers and receivers. The Motor Carrier Safety Selection Standard Act, introduced by Senator Deb Fischer of Nebraska, calls for the establishment of a safety fitness determination test for shippers and brokers to ensure trucking companies are licensed, registered, and insured. Doing that, the bill sponsor says, would improve highway safety by making sure that the drivers being hired on by companies are safe and reliable. The Senate bill is very similar to a House bill of the same name that was introduced earlier this year. That House bill has so far garnered the bipartisan support of 19 co-sponsors. One day after removing 4 ELDs from their list of registered devices, FMCSA has added one back. The golden ELD model number GRS was reinstated on Wednesday. FMCSA did not say why. The 3 other recently revoked ELDs are still on the outside looking in, however. Those include All Truckers ELD model number ARS, Prime ELD model number PRS, and Secure ELD model number SRS. If you've been using one of those 3 ELDs, you'll need to stop using it immediately and revert to paper logs or logging software to record hours of service data and replace it with a compliant one before September 23rd. FMCSA says the revoked devices did not meet the minimum requirements outlined by federal regulations. Take extra care driving through construction zones on the Pennsylvania Turnpike this week. The Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission is partnering up with Pennsylvania State Police for a safety blitz called Operation Orange Squeeze. Troopers are getting into construction vehicles to spot people driving dangerously through work zones. In a video posted on the Pennsylvania Turnpike Facebook page, maintenance worker Donnie Sarver recounts a time he was hit by someone on the side of the road who was on their phone while driving. Sarver said putting troopers in different vehicles does make a difference.
When they see the state trooper cars, with all the technology through Waze and Google, people are warning them that they're in the pattern. But if they're sitting in our vehicles, they don't know it, and that's a big plus.
Corporal Joe May of the Pennsylvania State Police says he's aware of how people are driving out there as well.
Those signs are there, miles in advance, and typically what I see when I'm working in the work zones in the marked cars that people generally will speed up to the point that they can't anymore, and then they merge at the last second rather than getting over, with those advanced signs that are out there.
A similar campaign was held in April. Pennsylvania State Police say they cited more than 430 drivers during that event and arrested 2 people for driving under the influence. The California Highway Patrol is reminding truckers not to bypass open scales. That's the law. In a Facebook post, the CHP said commercial motor vehicle drivers must stop and submit their vehicles for inspections when scales are open. If you don't, you face fines of up to several $1,000s, a 1.5-point moving violation on your record, higher insurance costs, and more. It's also a misdemeanor. The CHP didn't mention what prompted the reminder. Hawaii is the newest state mulling over a road user tax. The state DOT is proposing changes to counties starting in 2025. They told the Honolulu City Council that electric vehicle owners would be the first in line. The options are an 0.8 cent per mile tax or a flat tax of $50. All vehicles in all counties would eventually fall under the plan by the year 2033, effectively replacing the fuel tax altogether. The rising number of electric vehicles is prompting the move. Gas tax revenue in particular is down as a result. DOT officials believe the road user tax would offset their losses in revenue. A crash involving an Amtrak train and car hauler has prompted a lawsuit against 3 trucking companies. The incident happened earlier this month in Lakeland, Florida, where the car hauler got stuck on train tracks. The driver of the truck and a passenger were able to get out before the Amtrak train carrying 173 people slammed into its trailer. Dozens of people on the train were hurt, 8 were hospitalized. The lawsuit was filed against the 3 trucking companies that own the vehicles being transported. The plaintiffs are claiming that the driver was negligent. The Polk County Sheriff's Office is still investigating the circumstances surrounding the crash. The next Women of Trucking Advisory Board meeting has been added to the calendar. It'll take place virtually on August 14th. The board has a number of items on the agenda. One includes exploring ways to improve training, mentorship, and outreach programs intended to get more women into the industry. This will be the group's 4th meeting overall. The Women of Trucking Advisory Board, comprised of 16 members, was created last year to make recommendations to the FMCSA on how to recruit and retain more women in the trucking industry. And finally, a survey has found that 50% of professional truck drivers travel with their pet. Truckstop recently surveyed 500 owner-operators. Half of respondents said they travel with their pets for emotional support. Brent Hutto with Truckstop says pets bring a lot of benefits to drivers, including a financial benefit that some don't know about.
You can write off your dog, some of your dog's costs, as a tax benefit to you because it is a security measure. So believe it or not, you can write off part of the cost of the dog being in the cab with you on your taxes every year because it's considered a security benefit for you and your rig. So I think of that. I think of mental health and security and then a little bit of a tax benefit for you. So those 3 things are sort of the benefits of having an animal with you in the rig.
The survey also found that a majority of drivers would consider a different career path if they couldn't bring their pets with them on the road. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Scott. OOIDA will offer its Truck to Success live seminar October 17th through the 19th at the Courtyard by Marriott in Blue Springs, Missouri. The 3-day in-depth training offers step-by-step guidance for truckers considering becoming owner-operators or moving onto their own authority. We'll have a link to where you can sign up to take the course at our website, landlinenow.com. If you'd like to join OOIDA, you can do it at a discount. Just call the membership department during business hours at 816-229-5791. You can join the association or renew your membership for 2 years for $50, a $40 discount. Next, Scott Thompson discusses current economics in trucking with Jason Miller of Michigan State University, and I'll discuss the state of trucking litigation with Nathan Morris of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Institute for Legal Reform. We'll be back in just a moment with more of the program. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
You trust PrePass for more bypasses? Now let PrePass help with tolls. PrePass toll service means lower cost, one invoice for all tolls, and fewer violations. Created by truckers for truckers. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
Attention all truckers, Dean Michael, the tax doctor here. I want to talk to you about those dreaded tax problems. I know you want to keep on trucking and not even think about them, but let's face it, they're not going away all on their own. You need professional help. I've been helping truckers put their tax problems in the rearview mirror for years. I can help you too. Call me now for a free consultation at 888-557-4020 or go to mytaxhelpmd.com. It's like I always say, keep your eyes on the road, I'll keep mine on the IRS. 888-557-4020.
Landline Now, welcome back. So it turns out there won't be a strike at UPS despite the very real threat of that happening. Between that, all the troubles at Yellow, and the ongoing freight recession, we've got plenty to grill our next guest about. Professor Jason Miller is the interim chair of the Department of Supply Chain Management at Michigan State University's Eli Broad College of Business, and he joins us on the line now. Professor Miller, thanks for joining us.
You're most welcome.
So, shortly after talks resumed between UPS and the Teamsters, they announced a tentative deal to avoid a strike. We're obviously still getting details on just what the agreement looks like. So I'm not going to ask really your opinion on specifics here, but your initial reaction to a deal being struck.
This didn't surprise me. When you looked at where the sort of negotiating power was, the Teamsters were in the driver's seat, no pun intended. UPS is coming off of some of their most profitable years that they've ever had, 2021, 2022, 2020, kind of being 1, 2, 3 in that order. 2023 is going to be a very profitable year as well. But given we also have excess capacity in this sector, in comparison to where we were a couple years ago, UPS management was staring in the face of losing substantial volumes. Some of the numbers we saw were up to 30% of parcels being diverted to other players. And so you combine UPS having the profitability to support higher wages and meet the union's needs, coupled with management staring effectively into the abyss of losing a substantial amount of volume. It doesn't surprise me they came back to the Teamsters with a amicable agreement.
It's interesting you frame it like that in terms of the Teamsters having, some leverage there, because we had been talking about the impact of a strike, right? The ripple effects on the supply chain, the public, businesses, so on and so forth. When you say that, now I'm wondering if this agreement is maybe going to have some sort of ripple effect on negotiations, maybe with other companies and carriers down the line. Do you see that as a possibility? What does this say about, again, negotiating leverage moving forward?
Right now we're in still an incredibly tight job market at the moment, equivalent to certainly 2018, 2019, and probably arguably the late 1990s. And late 1990s were the tightest job market really in U.S. history, or at least recent economic history. So we're at that point today. So, it is, labor's in a fairly strong position at the moment. And again, I think the unique feature of this negotiation was taking place at a time where UPS was seeing falling real activity. When you take a look at, number of parcels moved being down from where they were, certainly the highs of 2021. There was a reason to strike a deal and strike it quickly before there could be even more diversion of volume to, let's say, FedEx ground.
I want to ask you also about Yellow, where they've also averted a strike for the time being, at least after an agreement on benefits payouts. And I say for now because Yellow clearly facing a number of mounting financial problems at the moment. When you look at Yellow's situation, where they are and where we may be headed, what do you see as the most likely outcome there?
Unfortunately, I find it very difficult to see a scenario where Yellow can survive much longer. And I say that because if you take a look, back in 2014, they were hauling, 58,000 tons a day of LTL freight across all the operations. In 2019, that was down to 41,000 tons a day. Last year, that was about 30,000 tons a day in 2022. If you look at where they were at this year for the most recent mid-quarter update, they were reporting tonnage down 16% in April and May from the prior year. You have to figure with the large number of shippers that started to move freight away from them in July, you have to think that their July's got to be down 30, maybe 40% year over year. And it's just difficult to see how they're going to be able to stay in business given that type of tonnage decline, coupled with the fact that they are the low-cost carrier in the sector. And so their yield is far less than, let's say, ODFL or FedEx Freight on a per ton basis.
Yeah, it's really in a free spin, Yellow is, in terms of, I mean, really everything. I mean, you look at the stock price, you look at all the numbers down the line, and it certainly doesn't look good. Should that scenario play out, should Yellow collapse and, again, cease to exist, if that happens, we're talking, I think, 19,000 employees or something in that neighborhood, people who work for Yellow. In terms of a collapse and its effects on the industry, on the supply chain, on, smaller carriers on down the line, what is that going to look like if that does happen?
Well, so right now has been the softest LTL market, honestly, since the global financial crisis on a couple-year basis. If you look at activity as measured by hours worked from the Bureau of Labor Statistics for that industry, hours worked are down about 11% from the 2021 peak. I mean, you saw FedEx Freight, a very well-run LTL carrier, report a 24% decline in tonnage for their second quarter of this year, which runs through May, relative to the prior year. So we do have a decent amount of excess capacity. You saw Knight-Swift in their earnings call saying AAA Cooper could absorb, double-digit rate increases. So we do have the most excess capacity in the LTL sector that we've had in a very long time. On aggregate, we can absorb a good share of Yellow's freight fairly quickly, and given the shipper diversions we were just talking about, we likely already have seen some of that absorbed. Where you're going to see disruptions are going to be for those shippers that were very Yellow-centric. So let's say 40 or 50% of their LTL tonnage was moving by Yellow. Those are going to be the shippers that are going to experience more disruption. Right now, given the excess capacity that we have in the sector, I think on aggregate, if Yellow fails sooner rather than later, there will be an easier absorption of those volumes.
Let's zoom out a little bit and just kind of look at the big picture in terms of the freight recession. We keep waiting for word that we've hit bottom. I think people keep looking for the bottom. I'm curious as to what you think, where we are right now in terms of that. And have we seen the bottom? How far along are we in this?
No, so I do believe we are at the bottom. If you look at manufacturing activity, which is the biggest driver of trucking demand, we've been in a trough essentially since November of last year. So basically volume sort of skating along that. Housing activity is starting to recover a little bit. We saw housing starts in May and June, both better than what they have been. They're above where they were in 2018 and 2019, which is sort of my benchmark I use right now. Almost assuredly, July's housing starts will actually show a positive year-over-year reading. That'll be the first time since we saw housing activity really fall starting in the third quarter of last year as the Fed raised interest rates. We're starting to see inventories get corrected. We still have quite a bit of excess in certain wholesale sectors like apparel, and that'll be a drag on import volumes. So my sense is that we're at the trough right now, but we're likely to be sort of in this trough for my best case scenario is we start coming out of it in the second quarter of 2024. So we've got another 8 months left before there's going to start being a meaningful recovery of freight volumes.
Kind of a slow ascent until that point, you think? Best case scenario?
It's going to be slow out of this one because the last several freight recessions have really ended because we've had these big shocks to demand. And that was the housing boom in 2004. That was the ELD mandate, hurricane recovery effort, business tax cut boom of 2017, 2018, the spending boom for consumers in 2020, and then, March of 2021 with that round of stimulus. We're not going to have something like that taking place right now. And so I think it's going to be a much more organic, slow recovery of volume.
Yeah, you kind of read my mind because I was going to ask you what history tells us about freight recessions and what we could maybe learn from those as it applies to this one. But as you're well aware, and we're all aware, we're really living in historic times and nothing seems normal these days. So not really necessarily a good benchmark for looking at this current one, it sounds like.
No, there really isn't. And it's difficult even when we go further back to the 1990s, because one, the economy was structurally different. But we also have, let's say, the offshoring boom that takes place in 2001 through 2003, where we lose 10% of U.S. manufacturing activity because of offshoring. We're not going to see anything like that now. I mean, we are seeing certainly heightened interest in reshoring. I am very cautious, though, about the ultimate freight market effects. I think we're going to be looking at sort of a long slog out, barring some very unexpected event.
We talk about all these challenges that are out there for big fleets, for smaller fleets, for owner-operators. I mean, we're talking lower rates for those smaller owner-operators and smaller fleets that are dealing with the same challenges of operational costs and everything in between. Do you have any particular advice, I think especially for the smaller fleets that are out there, as they contend with all of these challenges, and we're seeing a number of people look for the exits, because things are so challenging? What advice do you have for those people in terms of weathering the storm and maybe getting to the other side of this?
Well, I think the biggest thing that is not putting all your eggs in the spot market basket. I think the availability of, different digital brokerages has really increased the extent that smaller fleets would be willing to be on the spot market versus the more traditional model where you had a couple anchor shippers, typically fairly small manufacturers, where their outbound freight provided your head haul movement and you relied on brokers to get yourself back. So I think that, again, finding ways to obtain contract freight. If you're a small carrier, it makes more sense to be working with small shippers. To be blunt, the big boys and girls of the world who are shipping hundreds of loads or thousands of loads a year, they want to be working with big carriers and or big brokers to get big chunks of capacity. But it's finding, I think, those couple shippers to whom you can attach yourself to. Because those contract rates tend to be substantially more resilient than spot rates when we go through down periods.
Yeah, good advice. Just in closing here, your department obviously looks at the supply chain through an interesting lens. Is there anything in particular you've got your eye on that you feel like we should know about, or something that interests you, maybe worries you? Just some sort of thing that's lurking out there that may be new or interesting to you.
Nothing I'd say in particular that's really coming to mind. I mean, the one issue that keeps coming up is cybersecurity. And, this is something that we would never have been talking about 25 years ago in this sector. It's just the absolute criticality of that topic. And just, everybody being mindful. The other thing, too, is, all the discussions of double brokering and fraud and needing to go to that extra effort on these fronts, because that's unfortunately the world we're living in right now in the supply chain space.
Another topic for another day there, perhaps, but we'll have to leave it there today. Professor Miller, thanks for your time and your insights. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Hey, take care.
Our thanks once again to Professor Jason Miller of the Department of Supply Chain Management at Michigan State University's Eli Broad College of Business. Stick around, Landline Now is back after this.
Firestone tires are for more of everything. More miles for every tire dollar, and more confidence in your fleet. At Firestone, we help fleets save with dependable value. Find your local Firestone dealer today at firestonetire.com/dealer.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off Truckstop Load Board Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2023 when you purchase Load Board Pro.
By now, you're probably familiar with the term nuclear verdict. It refers to the extraordinarily large court judgments, in some cases involving trucks. You're listening to Landline Now, and I'm your host, Mark Reddick. Welcome back to the program. The fact is, nuclear verdicts have been a problem for a while in the trucking industry, but now we can put some numbers behind them. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce Institute for Legal Reform recently conducted a study of nuclear verdicts and other aspects of trucking litigation, as well as their effect on both the industry and the wider economy. I talked about the study with Nathan Morris, Senior Vice President for Legal Reform Advocacy with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Institute for Legal Reform, about their findings. Well, Nathan, what is the overall situation that the study is addressing?
What the study speaks to is the fact that the number of lawsuits against trucking companies and the size of the verdicts and settlements that result are going up steadily over time. And it's not a sustainable situation. Trucking is a linchpin of the American economy. Every consumer in the country relies on goods that are carried by truck. And as the industry is faced with this kind of pressure, it's bad for everybody who needs goods off shelves.
What information did you work from, the source for the statistics found here in the study?
Publicly reported data, it's verdicts and the number of publicly reported settlements in trucking litigation. And what's interesting is that we're able to know some things, but we don't know everything. It's obvious, though, that in addition to the reported costs, big verdicts, large settlements, there are a large number of claims that are being filed that are being resolved privately through confidential settlements. And so it stands to reason that the amount that's going out in settlement money is also going up. So as the public numbers go up, other costs also go up. So the pressure the industry is facing from increased costs is larger than the public numbers by themselves make obvious.
I want to talk a little bit about some of the findings of the study. What is driving this trend toward more litigation and larger awards?
At bottom, it's lawyer tactics. Lawyers have figured out ways to make these cases more expensive. It makes more money for them. You see them advertising more, and then they're doing things before cases are filed to increase their possible value of claims. And so it's not truckers and it's not people who are involved in accidents who are causing this. So it's the lawyers who are taking the cases and trying to turn them into larger, more lucrative cases for themselves.
Did you find this is more prevalent in some areas of the country rather than others?
There is a prevalence of trucking litigation everywhere. You can look in different parts of the country. It's in the Mountain West. It's in the Southeast. It's out west and on the Pacific Coast. It's a national trend. There's a different way that some of it's being done. And in certain states, there are different tactics or techniques that lawyers may be using more aggressively than other states. But throughout the country, the number of suits and their costs is continually increasing.
You mentioned different tactics and techniques that they're using. Can you give us some examples?
One of trial lawyers' favorite techniques is to use something called anchoring, where at the close of the case, they put a number in front of the jury that has no basis in the evidence. So they may say $200 million, even if there's nothing in the evidence that suggests that that's an appropriate award or amount to award to a plaintiff. But what that does is it puts a number in jurors' minds, and then they start working against that number during their deliberations. So by simply putting a number in front of them, the lawyers can increase the amounts that are at play in cases. They're also using a technique called the reptile theory or reptile tactics, where they argue the case not necessarily in the facts or the needs of the plaintiff or what's required to make that plaintiff whole, but they say, this is something that you as a jury need to do to keep your community safe. And so by discussing safety issues and consumer protection and things that aren't necessarily part of the case, it triggers a different response from jurors. And so they're able to change the way that cases are deliberated by changing how they argue them. And that's something that's very common around the country. They're using techniques like this to affect juries and affect their views of cases. There are also things that are happening before cases even start that are really changing the litigation environment. The way that lawyers advertise has changed. You probably see this wherever you are in the country. But there's a lot more lawyer advertising, and there are a lot of firms that have specialization in trucking and are aggressively advertising, looking for trucking clients. The advertising works, and we know that because the number of miles trucks drive every year has gone up continuously since 2000. So over the last 20 years, the number of miles trucks log per year is up about 50%, a little less than that. The number of catastrophic accidents is down, if you look at it on a per mile basis, by more than 30%. So more miles logged, less accidents per mile would suggest that trucking has gotten much safer in many respects. But over that same period of time, the number of lawsuits has gone up and their cost has gone up. And so those two things don't really connect, right? If you think about it, if you have a safer industry, why are costs going up so much? And that's one of the reasons that we commissioned this report. So we want to look at that.
Talk a little bit, if you would, about how this is affecting the trucking industry. I mean, you've referred to some of that there, but obviously the implications are much broader than that. Can you talk a little bit about other effects that it's having on trucking?
I mean, the most obvious immediate effect is it's becoming difficult to get insurance for some truckers. And when they can get insurance, the cost of insurance is going up. And then even when affordable insurance is available, sometimes the coverage amounts are going down. So there's less ability to manage risk, and that has an impact on businesses. So, fundamentally, if you have a business and you're a trucker, you probably want to focus on that and not focus on the finances of your insurance policy and finding insurance and making sure it's adequate. So it distracts from business operations. It makes trucking more expensive in general because insurance costs go up. Somebody has to pay for those, and that means that truckers charge more to carry the freight, and that means that small businesses that are shelving items have to charge more to put them there. So it's an effect that goes well beyond the industry. When insurance premiums go up, insurance access goes down, you also, in some markets, are seeing less folks able to truck and carry freight. And so with less competition, prices also can go up. And so that's another thing that's affecting things for consumers down the line and further down the supply chain, is that you're seeing a higher cost to move goods in the economy.
The study looked at solutions as well, and I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what some of the solutions identified in the study are.
So the solutions we identify are mostly to stop attorney game playing and make things more fair in the litigation. So if somebody is involved in an accident and it's catastrophic, they would absolutely still be able to prosecute their case, but their lawyer wouldn't be able to do some of the things that are manipulative or abusive that can happen now if you implement the reforms that we suggest. For example, we suggest presenting more fairly the amounts of damage that are done and how medicals are billed. It's pretty common for lawyers to work with doctors who overcharge for specific medical procedures, very expensive CAT scans or MRIs or costly pain medication and pain management regimes, and then put the inflated numbers in front of the jury and never tell the jury what care would really cost if the insurer paid for it, for example. So Florida this year passed something that we think will be beneficial across lawsuits, but in trucking in particular, to make it so that you can put in front of the jury what insurance would pay. You can still put the billed amounts in too, if they're very high, but then the jury can consider what is it really worth? What did the care really cost? What should it have really cost? And hopefully reach a fair outcome. So a lot of the reforms we propose are like that. They're about making sure that evidence is presented in a way that's not inflammatory, that it's fair, and that jurors have access to all the information they need to make good decisions.
Something else that you talked about in there is reasonable caps on non-economic damages. Can you explain that in layman's terms?
Sure. So non-economic damages are usually pain and suffering. I just mentioned medical damages. Those can usually be figured out. There's usually a number attached to them. Sometimes the numbers are manipulated, and we're concerned about that. But the pain and suffering numbers can be arbitrary. Certainly pain and suffering is real, but many states have reasonable caps on non-economic or punitive damages. And some states are moving to do that now in trucking and commercial auto cases in particular. Iowa, for example, this year enacted a new law that puts a total cap on that kind of damage. And that's helpful because if, as I mentioned before, there's something that trial lawyers do that inflames or angers the jury, and they give a really big number for the non-economic damages or the punitive damages, the cap can bring it down to a number that's more fair. And so that addresses one of the trial lawyers' tactics.
What would you like to see come out of this study? What would you like to see in terms of a result within the overall atmosphere of trucking as a result of what you've done here?
I think what we'd like to see is policymakers take this problem seriously. Trucking is an essential aspect of the economy. The economy doesn't work without trucks moving freight. And so if there's pressure that's being put on the trucking industry because of aggressive litigation tactics, abusive litigation tactics in some instances, and providing some relief so that cases can be prosecuted in ways that are fair, that are reasonable, and that don't put that kind of pressure on the industry, but that do hold responsible folks who, if there is an accident where compensation is warranted, that's still available. That's what we're looking for, is to find a balance where lawyers aren't able to take cases and turn them into gigantic verdicts, large amounts, by using aggressive in courtroom tactics. And it can be done very fairly. There are a lot of states that have tackled this over time, and they've done it in other places, like with medical injuries and medical malpractice. And the same kind of precision can be applied to trucking and really address this problem. So we look forward to talking to policymakers around the country about that.
That's all I have, Nathan. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, thanks for your interest in our paper, and if anyone's interested in reading it, it's available on our website at instituteforlegalreform.com.
That was Nathan Morris, Senior Vice President for Legal Reform Advocacy with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Institute for Legal Reform. We'll put a link on our website, landlinenow.com, to where you can read the study of trucking litigation. Again, that's at landlinenow.com. Arizona has upgraded a rest area on Interstate 17 north of Phoenix. The Sunset Point rest area had been closed, but a temporary truck parking only area was kept open during renovation. Garen Groff of the Arizona DOT talked with me about the changes.
This was a year-long renovation project at Sunset Point where ADOT upgraded the restrooms, water and septic systems, and other amenities inside and out. So we're looking at things like new lighting fixtures, doors, sinks, and hand dryers on the inside of the buildings. Outside, we've got everything from lighting to sidewalk repairs, landscaping, and signage.
And what is the truck parking situation there at that rest area?
We do have quite a bit of truck parking there. We also added 2 additional spaces for trucks. I believe we have a total of 86 spaces at Sunset Point.
Very quickly, where is this located?
So this is north of the Metro Phoenix area. As you just climb out of the low desert with all the saguaros, getting up into sort of the grassland and juniper territory on your way up to places like Flagstaff. For people who have been there, it's a really scenic rest area with just a stunning view of the Bradshaw Mountains and then a valley in between. People will love to stop there to relax just because of the view.
Why did they choose to upgrade this particular rest area at this time?
ADOT's been updating a number of our restrooms as they're aging. That was the case with Sunset Point. One of the projects was reopening a building that had been closed since a new restroom building had opened in 2010.
Garen Groff of the Arizona DOT. In the wake of the renovation, the temporary rest area for commercial vehicles at Badger Springs has closed. For Landline Now, I'm Mark Reddick.
Forget misaccuracy, weigh your truck on a CAT scale.
When you weigh on a CAT scale, you get a no excuses guarantee. You can now save time weighing by using your smartphone. Find out more at weightmytruck.com.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount. Landline Now. Welcome back. It's time for another of our 50 on 50. 50 significant events from OOIDA's history in celebration of the association's 50th anniversary.
If you've been an observer of politics at all, you've likely heard the term PAC, or PAC, which stands for Political Action Committee. And like many groups that operate in Washington, D.C., OOIDA has a PAC. So what is it and how does it operate? What does it do? Here to explain are OOIDA Chief of Staff Angel Burnell and the association's Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. Angel, Jay, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Good to be with you.
So real quick on kind of a broad thing, what is a PAC and how do they work?
So a PAC is a political action committee, and the goal of a PAC is to provide donations to elect or re-elect political candidates. The OOIDA PAC's goal or mission is to educate lawmakers on issues that are important to small business truckers.
So how did the PAC come about?
The PAC was founded in 1989. We had a law firm in D.C. that put together the PAC and filed all the paperwork. We have since taken over all administration of the OOIDA PAC in-house. I'm actually the PAC treasurer. OOIDA has a membership PAC, and what a membership PAC is a way for our PAC to operate where administrative costs don't come out of the PAC. So 100% of any donations or monies received go to elect or re-elect federal candidates that are working for OOIDA or that support our issues. The benefits, again, our administrative costs don't come out of the PAC, but there is a negative too. A membership PAC can only collect donations from our members. So it does limit our abilities to take donations. It can't be from any trucker. It can't be from just the public. We have to only take PAC donations from the members of our organization.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how the PAC funds are used. And obviously, as you said, Angel, it's to elect or re-elect candidates that support truckers, support OOIDA's various issues. But it's a little bit deeper than that. Can you kind of explain?
Yeah, the primary use of the PAC funds is to continually educate lawmakers on OOIDA positions and different trucking issues. And it's also a way to build relationships with the various elected officials and other candidates. And, the government affairs team and the D.C. office is conducting hundreds of meetings throughout the year with various congressional offices. The majority of those are primarily with congressional staff. The actual elected officials are running all throughout Washington, taking votes, doing all sorts of meetings. A lot of the times we are fortunate to have members participate in the meetings, but the PAC funds give us another opportunity to meet directly with a congressman, congresswoman, a senator, and have a extended, detailed conversation on specific policies. And right now, a lot of that is lining up behind improving truck parking, improving hours of service, fighting back against speed limiters. So really having a chance to talk about a lot of the nuanced and detailed issues that certainly a lot of officials in Washington do not have a great understanding of, but through the PAC and through these meetings, they certainly come out with a much better appreciation of the trucking industry.
Generally speaking, what lawmakers does the PAC focus its donations on?
So we have very thorough conversations about who to target with our PAC dollars. And primarily, we are focusing on officials on transportation and trucking committees of jurisdiction, chairmen of transportation subcommittees and highway safety subcommittees. Then we're looking at certain areas and constituents and states where a lot of our members have an interest. Congressional districts that have a trucking interest and have thousands of OOIDA members in that district. So looking at folks who are going to have influence on key congressional committees in Washington.
One of the things that is kind of interesting about this is the fact, Angel, that this is a bipartisan PAC. And can you explain why that's important?
Absolutely. The OOIDA PAC is bipartisan. That means that we reach out to candidates on both sides of the aisle. The letter behind their name doesn't matter to us. What matters to us is the position that they take with regard to OOIDA issues. We want to support those candidates that support truckers, that support trucking, that have an interest in OOIDA issues, those things that are important to small business truckers.
And one of the other things that I did want to ask you about is how does this compare to other PACs? There's a lot of PACs out there, and OOIDA is one voice in the middle of all this cacophony. I'm wondering if you can kind of explain how it does compare to other PACs.
Yeah, I like to say that the OOIDA PAC is just big enough to be dangerous, and certainly, it really helps having 150,000 members who, a lot are just giving whatever they can to the PAC fund, and that helps, generate a pretty substantial chunk of money that we can, take a lot of time and pick out members to contact through that funds. And when you look at the OOIDA PAC compared to some of the other big players in the trucking industry, we are not the biggest by any stretch, but that allows us to be nimble, really build strong relationships with the members that we target through PAC funds. When you look at some of the other organizations, they are maxing out on pretty much every member in Washington, D.C. So they're kind of taken for granted, I think, a little bit, where if we're spending the money on a candidate, they know the value of that contribution, and really, I think, helps us be a little more selective in who we want to target, and really build those relationships with folks who are supporting small business truckers.
And really, to just follow up on what Jay talked about, because of the size of our PAC, it is much smaller than a lot of other industry PACs. We are very deliberate with how we spend our money, meaning we don't just send campaign contributions into somebody that's supporting OOIDA initiatives. We do that, but we send the money to attend an event so that we get face-to-face time without lawmakers so that we can really educate that person. The event is not important. What is important is the time we get to spend without lawmakers so that they know OOIDA and they know our issues.
So it's really about building relationships.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
I'm wondering if you could give us an example of an issue where the PAC was useful in terms of moving the issue forward for truckers.
Yeah, the Trucker Bathroom Access Act that has just been reintroduced this Congress is a great example of that. During the pandemic, we heard about Congressman Troy Nehls, who serves on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, talk about the importance of truckers. And through our background with him being on the committee, we had reached out initially to his office, and using the PAC funds had a chance to really have some great conversations with the congressman personally, talk to him about the challenges and just really the unbelievable aspects that drivers who are picking up or waiting on their loads at a shipping or receiving facility sometimes can't use the bathroom at that facility while they're waiting around. And through those conversations, that kind of has led into actual legislation being introduced in the House of Representatives to help small business truckers who are out on the roads every day.
Okay. I want to thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us, Mark.
I've been talking with OOIDA Chief of Staff Angel Burnell and the Association's Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes.
That was another of our 50 on 50. 50 significant events from OOIDA's history in celebration of the Association's 50th anniversary. We'll bring you a new entry every week from now until the actual anniversary celebration.
Our program is produced by the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association, the national organization representing America's small business truckers. That's our show. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife,
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
Chrome, and I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us! Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.